Lord.
Good deal. Okay, so we are on the fourth week of Characters of Christmas. Week one, we did Zechariah, Elizabeth, and John, and the way they point us to Christ is through the message of repentance. Week two was Mary and Joseph, and it bleeded over to week three, and that was just the amazing faith and obedience that both Mary and Joseph had. And week three was the shepherds and the angels, and they spread the word that Jesus was born, and they praised and thanked God for the gift of Jesus. So those were the first 3 weeks. Today is the Magi, and we're not going to show any video this week, and it's not. And there's for two reasons, and you can say the one.
You know, we use that footage. I use that footage from the movie, and as I tried to tell you in the email that went out, I think it qualified for the fair use policy, but YouTube gave me a very stern warning, and I don't want to get a copyright strike against me. I tried to appeal it and haven't heard anything, so I think I better not do that until I get it all worked out. But
anyhow, the other side of it is that when we're using a movie called The Nativity, which, like I said, if you haven't seen it, get the movie and see the whole thing together, because it's a great movie. But I will say, both Scott and I talked, and their portrayal of the Magi is more traditionally based than probably biblically based.
That movie is so accurate and so representative, except when it comes to the Magi. We have a whole bunch of traditions that have no basis in Scripture, and they've built up over the years. Mary, you going to talk about it?
Oh, yeah. Should we unmute them or no? I guess we can just. So the traditions of the Magi, when we think, or the traditions of the wise men, how many do we, and you guys can just put up your fingers, how many do we always say, how many wise men there were? There was always three, okay? And what were they? They were kings. And does anybody know the names of the wise men? Do you know?
Balthazar, Gaspard, and Melchior. And there's no record of that. Somebody along the way made those names up. I don't know what to tell you. They have actual names for them. There's no reason to believe there were three or only three. All we know is it's plural.
They came from the east.
They came from the east. It could mean a lot of things.
We'll discuss that.
Yeah, and we're going to discuss that at some length, because it's really kind of neat.
And when did they get there?
Yeah, there are all these pictures of the Magi together with the shepherds by the cradle in the
Stable.
In the manger. Yeah, and they didn't. The one thing we're certain of is they weren't there immediately. We don't know exactly how long, but they weren't there instantly.
Their gifts?
The gifts: gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And there are all of these traditions about the significance of those gifts. And I've struggled for years trying to read some significance into gold, frankincense, and myrrh. And, there's Kathy. Trying to read some significance into, and let me take a moment out. Kathy.
She's still connected.
Oh, okay. So prophet and priest and king, and the gold is for king. There just isn't any. All you can really conclude about those three gifts is that they're gifts fit for a king. But beyond that, trying to say the gold represents this, the frankincense represents this, I must have seen a few dozen explanations of what the significance of each of those gifts, and they're all different, and they're just conjecture. So most of what gets told to us about the Magi is tradition, and I'm not bashing tradition. I just, we try and stick to the Scriptures, and it's just not in there. What is in there is the Greek word magoi. That's not magoi, it's magoi. And it comes from magus, or mago, which is a mage. And all it is a wise man, and the I on the end is plural. It's like octopi for octopus and hippopotami. This is Magi. The mago is singular. It's just nothing more complicated than that. More than one wise man from the east showed up, and they had gifts fit for a king. But there's a whole lot more to it than that.
And it is an amazing story without all the traditions. In fact, I think it's more amazing. Did you want to say something to Kathy? Kathy's on, Kathy.
Yeah, we'll take that moment. Kathy, I'm so glad to see you. I've thought, since I saw you early this week, she's down for us, bottom right. And it's good to see you. I want to talk to you later today about Alton and see how everything's going.
But we lifted him up in prayer.
We did. We definitely included him, and he remains in our prayers. So it's good to see you.
So I'm going to read from Matthew chapter 2. And something to note as we start with Matthew, most of the nativity story, the birth of Jesus, we read in Luke, not in Matthew. The only place that the Magi appear in the story is in Matthew. And we were reading a commentary yesterday that I thought it really hit home. They said, if Luke had talked about the Magi, we would know more details. Because as Scott always says, Luke was this historian. He was this person that was really into the details, and anything he said had a purpose. Matthew is not that type of writer, and there's a lot more mystery behind how Matthew writes. So it is interesting, because when we hear the nativity story, we just stick it all together. But parts of it, almost all of it, is from Luke, and the parts about Joseph are in Matthew, and the part about the Magi are in Matthew. And those are the parts that we don't have as much detail on.
That's right.
So, reading from Matthew chapter 2, verse 1. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judea during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, asking, "Where is the one who has been born King of the Jews?" He saw his star in the east and have come to worship him. When King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. "In Bethlehem in Judea," they replied, "for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be shepherd of my people Israel." When Herod called the Magi secretly, and learned from them the exact time the star had appeared. And sending them to Bethlehem, he said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him." After they had heard the king, they went on their way. And the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with great delight. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshipped him. Then they opened their treasures and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh. And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they withdrew to their country by another route. And I lost Scott. Here he comes. So starting over at, he decided to print something else out. So starting over at chapter 2, verse 1 and 2. After Jesus was born in Bethlehem in Judah, during the time of King Herod, Magi from the east arrived in Jerusalem, asking them where the one who had been born King of the Jews. He saw his star in the east and have come to worship him.
So the first thing you want to take note of on that is that it says they showed up in Jerusalem and they just started asking around. They didn't go immediately to Herod. They showed up in Jerusalem and started asking, "Hey, where's this King of the Jews that's just been born?" Like they assume everybody will know. And of course, no one does. And that's sort of the irony of it, is that these people, and we think the most likely thing is they come from somewhere in Persia, which is like Iran, Iraq. But they show up.
And Babylon, it's important to know, Babylon is part of Persia.
And so they show up asking questions. Nobody knows. Herod gets wind of this. And, because people tell tales and report things. And he calls together his...
No, we're not there yet.
Oh,
So we have to go back to and say, so who were the Magi, though?
okay. And here's where it begins to get interesting. That Greek word, Magi, just sort of means a wise man. It means but I'm trying to think, how deep do you want to go on this?
Well, we go back, they're from Persia.
What happened was we did a study on Daniel, and I'm trying not to get ahead of Mary. She hates it when I get off schedule. But if you remember, we did that study on Daniel, and the Jews get carried away to Babylon. And in Babylon, there's the king, Nebuchadnezzar, has all of these advisors. He has astrologers, and he has what amounts to necromancers, sort of dark art people, all these people that supposedly reveal stuff to him. But there's this group called Chaldeans. And the Chaldeans, it's almost a secret society. I mean, there's a sort of a race of people called Chaldeans, but these Chaldeans have amassed tremendous knowledge. They study. That's what they do. They seek knowledge from everywhere. And he calls in addition to all of those people, he calls in the Chaldeans. I think after a lot of study on this, these Chaldeans are the Magi.
And to put this in perspective, this is 600 years before this has happened. So we're going to go back real quick and we studied Daniel, and if you turn your Bibles back to Daniel 1, so, all the Jews were taken away from Jerusalem and brought in, and remember, Nebuchadnezzar was interviewing basically Daniel and his friends, and it says, the king spoke with them, and among all the young men, he found no one equal to Daniel, Hananiah, Mishael, and Azariah. So they entered the king's service. In every matter of wisdom and understanding about which the king consulted them, he found them 10 times better than all the magicians and enchanters in his entire kingdom. And Daniel remained there until the first year of King Cyrus. And remember, Daniel lived to 70 and he stayed in Babylon. And I'm going to read one more paragraph if it's okay. Then remember, Daniel was brought in to do interpret the dreams of Nebuchadnezzar. And it said after he did this, he says, I'm in Daniel 2, verse 46. At this, King Nebuchadnezzar fell on his face, paid homage to Daniel, and ordered an offering of incense be presented to him. The king said to Daniel, your God is truly the God of gods, the Lord of kings, and the revealer of mysteries, since you were able to reveal this mystery. Then the king promoted Daniel and gave him many generous gifts. He made him ruler over the entire province of Babylon and chief administrator over all the wise men of Babylon. And at Daniel's request, the king appointed Shadrach, Meshach, and Abednego to manage the province of Babylon while Daniel remained in the king's court.
So Mary and I read this stuff all week, and we prepare all week, and then we get here. What do they say? No battle plan outlasts the first shot. I don't know how we got off track. What we're trying to get at here is that these guys show up from the east, and they know about this king of the Jews that's been born. Who are they? How did they know that? I mean, is it just, they're studying the stars and they immediately know if the stars line up like this, there's a king of the Jews being born? And that's not it. What we saw in Daniel, they all get hauled away. The Jews get hauled away to Babylon. And Nebuchadnezzar was smart. He brought the best and the brightest from all of the lands that he conquers, and he brings them back to Babylon, and he takes advantage of their knowledge. I mean, it's really a wise thing to do. And so there's knowledge from all over the known world in Nebuchadnezzar's, hometown. And this group, these Chaldeans, they turn out to be sort of like kingmakers. They provide advice and knowledge to kings, and sometimes they select certain ones, and they're the power behind the throne. They're the advisors that keep a really sharp king, ahead of the pack. And David shows up, Daniel shows up, and Nebuchadnezzar says, they test them, and these guys turn out to be brilliant. And Daniel has a way of understanding dreams, and he says, okay, you Chaldeans, take these young men and train them to be Chaldeans. I mean, take them and put them in my service and train them in your ways. Later, as we studied, there's this dream that Nebuchadnezzar is very troubled by, and none of the advisors, none of the astrologers, none of those people can interpret it. And Nebuchadnezzar says, well, if you can't interpret it, I'm going to have you all killed.
Well, first of all, he says, if you can't tell me what the dream was.
I know, I'm trying not to, we've got time. So, but he says, you can't interpret, you're going to be killed, and they can't. And so he sends out soldiers to kill, he decides they're all fake, and he's going to kill the wise men and the Chaldeans. And Daniel stands up and says, I can do it. And he does. And Nebuchadnezzar rewards him. He makes him number 2 in all of Babylon, second only to himself. But it says he puts him in charge of all of his wise men. Now, if you think about it, the place where this knowledge of a king of the Jews, the prophecy, it came from Daniel. He brought it with him. When we saw that when Mary read this in Matthew, we haven't gotten there yet, right? That's what happens when I get up to go print something. I think that's where we get off kilter. But what we're going to try and lay the case for is that 500 years before these Magi show up, Daniel has been hauled off into captivity in Babylon and brought with him the prophecy of the Messiah, of the King of Jews, and teaches it to them, and they know the signs to look for. 500 years later, they see the signs, and they show up back in Jerusalem looking for this prophesied king.
The Magi were not Jews. The Magi's were pagans or Gentiles.
Can you just read that part so I can get to talk?
Yes, and I'm going to read the second part. So the second thing, when King Herod heard this, he was disturbed, and all Jerusalem with him. And when he had assembled all the chief priests and scribes of the people, he asked them where the Christ was to be born. In Bethlehem in Judea, they replied, for this is what the prophet has written. But you, Bethlehem, in the land of Judah, are by no means least among the rulers of Judah, for out of you will come a ruler who will be the shepherd of my people, Israel.
So now let's see if...
What were you reading that?
That's back to Matthew.
I'll explain it. I'll tell you. This is in Matthew. It's in Matthew.
Reading Micah.
Well, let me explain it. So here's what happens. Word of this gets to Herod, and Herod calls in the scribes and the chief priest, and he says, hey, there's some guys in town saying that a king of the Jews has been born. I'm the king of the Jews, and the next king of the Jews is going to be one of my sons. What are they talking about? And so the scribes and the chief priests say, oh yeah, no, we know about this. And they quote the book of Micah. Now, Micah, maybe we'll do Micah sometime, but they quote the book of Micah and say this is the prophecy. And strangely, it's exactly the same thing that the Magi understand. They know this prophecy. And that's what we have to try and understand. How would they know that they're coming for the same purpose that these scribes and chief priests know about? They know this prophecy. That's why they show up. And Micah, I want to read something to you from Micah. First, it says that you, Bethlehem Ephrathah, and so this is a prophecy through Micah 500 years before, telling that Bethlehem who are small among the clans of Judah, out of you will come forth for me one to be ruler over Israel, one whose origins are of old, from the days of eternity. Now, I'd never even picked up on that before this week. But here's this prophecy 500 years old, and he says, out of you, Bethlehem, is going to come a leader of the Jews, a ruler of the Jews, whose origins are of old, from the days of eternity. That goes all the way back to 500 years. Now, actually, that's not right. It goes back 750 years, because about 600 years before Jesus was born, the Jews get hauled off to Babylon. So what happens is Micah does this prophecy. 100 years later, Daniel gets hauled off to Babylon and teaches it to these wise men living there. And it comes back through the Magi 500 years later. If I can, there's one other thing I want to read you from Micah before we move on, because I just sort of snapped to this week. It says, then the remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many peoples. In other words, the Jews are going to be scattered, and they were by this time. The remnant of Jacob will be in the midst of many people, like dew from the Lord, like showers on the grass, which do not. And so he's described, and you can read it on your own, but what Micah describes is the diaspora, the scattering of Jews. And at that time, this leader that God's going to send from Bethlehem, whose origins are in eternity. He's been there from the beginning. Micah tells the most perfect prophecy of the Messiah, and then Daniel carries it with him into Babylon. The Magi come in because they know the prophecy. And I don't see any other place it could come from other than through Daniel. So here's the thing. When a new king is born, when an heir is born, it was common to send out a herald or many heralds to go out in the countryside and say, a new king is born this day, and make a big presentation of it. Jesus is born, and there's no herald, there's nobody, and these people show up from Babylon, from Persia, doing the function that would normally happen for the birth of a king. They come in as heralds, and the tightness of this, and the how long it's been in play has just amazed me. One other thing to mention real quickly is it says that Herod hears these stories about the birth of a new Jewish king, and it says that he is troubled, and so is all of Jerusalem. And that seems to hang a lot of people up. The idea of a new king being born, and it's not one of Herod's sons, is troubling.
Obviously to Herod, that makes sense.
And you understand Herod, because he says, wait a minute, this is my piece of immortality, is that my sons are going to rule after me. It's going to be a dynasty. And now I'm hearing that there's somebody else who thinks they're going to take over as king from my descendants. But the people are disturbed because this is a potential turmoil. If there's anything worse than a bad king, it's turmoil, and maybe the next one is worse. So they begin hearing these rumors, and they think, oh man, we're up for a civil war. But the thing I want to tell you about is that word that says Herod was troubled.
Disturbed.
Disturbed. And I did a little dive on that. And that word, that Greek word, has to do, you think about troubled water, it's to be shaken up, to be stirred up, to be unsettled. But the crazy thing, I talk about words a lot. That one Greek word, that one Greek word, there are 46 Hebrew words that all translate to that same one. To say he was disturbed, well, you say, well, what does that mean, he was disturbed? I don't know. It just means he's stirred up. But there are 46 Hebrew words that when they translate them to Greek, they all get translated into that same word. The Jews, the Hebrew language, has a whole lot of words for being disturbed and troubled and stirred up. They've refined it to an art form. But anyway, Herod's upset. You want to go ahead and keep reading?
Okay, so I'm on verse 7. Then Herod called the Magi secretly and learned from them the exact time the star had appeared. And sending them to Bethlehem, he said, "Go and search carefully for the child, and when you find him, report to me, so that I too may go and worship him."
So, the question came up this week, why did Herod send for them secretly? Well, clearly, they hadn't been visiting with him before that. They've been going around town asking people, hey, you guys know anything about where this king of the Jews has been born? Herod doesn't like the sound of this, as I said, because a new king of the Jews is going to threaten his dynasty. And so he doesn't want anyone getting involved in this. He sends for them secretly because if they hear that Herod is consulting them, they're going to think there's some truth to it. And what you see from this is that Herod already has a plan. Herod knows why he sent for them. There's supposedly a new king of the Jews being born. Well, I know how to fix that. I'll kill him. And he calls them in and he says, by the way, how long ago did that star appear? And they tell him, and he acts like it's just a casual question. And where was he supposed to be? And it's Bethlehem. And that's what the chief priest has already told him. And so his next instruction, he says, well, I tell you what, you go find him and come back and tell me about it, because I want to go worship him too. I mean, this is great. This is a prophesied king, and when my reign is over, he'll be taken up for me. I want to go worship this guy. It's a great story, He makes it all sound so innocent.
You can go ahead.
I'll go ahead
and we know the outcome of it.
We don't have to read the rest of it.
I'm going to read the rest of it in a second.
Well, then read it. Yeah.
Do we know when the star appeared to the Magi?
We don't. We don't know exactly. And all we know is that Herod thinks that whenever the star appeared was when this child was born. We don't really, we can conjecture, but that's their understanding of it. And so we don't know how long it's been since the birth, but you can clearly see that they don't show up at the same time as the shepherds.
So verse 9, after they had heard the king, they went on their way, and the star they had seen in the east went ahead of them until it stood over the place where the child was. When they saw the star, they rejoiced with great delight. On coming to the house, they saw the child with his mother Mary, and they fell down and worshiped him. Then they opened their treasure and presented him with gifts of gold and frankincense and myrrh.
So this thing about how a star goes up over a house and how they do that, I don't know. I don't have a clue. If anybody does, call me this week and explain it to me, because I don't know how that's done. Transits and stuff, I can't do any of that. I can't navigate by the stars when I'm on the boat. I don't have a clue what this really says. But these guys, one of the big things that the Chaldeans did was study the stars. And these Magi come because they've been studying the stars. And it's another clue that it's probably these are the same ones that Daniel was a part of. But it says that they go to the place where the child was, and they went to the home. That word absolutely is home. And it says they're not still in a manger. They're not in somebody's cattle barn. We don't know where the home was.
We know it was in Bethlehem.
But we can assume that.
Yeah.
But they go to a home. They're already back. They're already out of the manger, wherever they are. This star, this sign leads them to where he is, and they open up their treasures and present these gifts to him: gold, frankincense, and myrrh.
And so on the gold, frankincense, and myrrh, gold was worth a lot of money, but actually at this time, what we read is frankincense and myrrh could have been, they were also worth a lot.
A whole lot.
And frankincense was used as a incense, and myrrh was used as an embalming method.
So let's talk about that for a minute. The gold, gold is always gold. I did a whole bunch of looking into the Roman coins, the gold and what gold is worth. If they brought a pound of gold, which is not, in terms of size, it's not very big. A Roman pound was about 3/4 of our pound. But if they brought a pound, it's about 3 years' wages for a working person. I spent hours on this. I know that's sick, but I did because, I looked at the value of the denarius that was being used for money and then how much a gold coin. And it just came very consistently. A pound would be about 3 years worth of wages for a worker. That's a sizable, for people who struggle daily to put food on the table, 3 years' wages in one place is a pretty good chunk of money. But this frankincense and myrrh, they come from across a desert, and they bring this stuff in. And both of them are resin from plants. They're like sap. They're kind of like amber, okay? And the frankincense gets used in a lot of religious rituals. That's why I've always thought maybe prophet, priest, and king. The frankincense gets used as a bunch in religious rituals. And pound for pound, it's worth a lot more than gold. It's very precious. The people who bring this stuff across the desert from the area that is Yemen have secret routes through the desert, and they've made these cisterns where water will stay for long periods of time. The city of Petra was made by these people who transport it. This is really expensive stuff. And then myrrh is used to embalm bodies, and it's used to keep the smell. And people are worried about the afterlife. They want to keep their body as intact as they can. So very rich people are embalmed with myrrh. The average person cannot afford it. But because it's a resin, because it's like a hardened sap, it's not nearly as heavy as gold. Pound for pound, this stuff is worth more than gold. So we don't know how much, we don't know how rich, but what we do know is these are gifts fit for a king, and these are things that the common, ordinary people in, the Jews never get their hands on.
And this is an example of Matthew writing this instead of Luke. Luke would have given us details of what, why, who, when, where. Matthew doesn't. And so it makes sense that we've come up with a bunch of sort of crazy, or maybe not crazy, but traditions that aren't written there. Because, I kept asking Scott, so what do you think they did with these gifts? And, what would Mary, and we don't know. There's a lot of speculation that the gold would have financed the next couple of years in Egypt, or, but we don't know.
Well, they went off to Egypt after this, and it's sort of a tradition that's how they lived, and that's how they were able to go to Egypt. And it's not unthinkable. I don't have a problem with that. We don't know. But
I cannot imagine a carpenter even appreciating the 3-year payment or bonus 3 years ahead. I don't think Joseph would even understand how much value that gold was.
maybe we're going to come to that. Give us a few minutes and we'll talk about it, and I'll tell you why I think what I think. But we don't know. What would they do with myrrh? They don't have a body to embalm. The point of this is these are gifts fit for a king. And what I kind of want everybody to see, since we're talking about Christmas and we're talking about the characters of it, what I want you to see is that this plan for the king, for the Messiah to be heralded, for the birth of a new king, the Jews have quit looking for him. The Jews, a lot of them, wouldn't want him to show up because, frankly, they've got a good deal going with the Romans. They really do. I mean, why would we want somebody to break this up? We've got all the power we can handle, and we're getting filthy rich.
The higher ups of the Jews.
The higher ups,
Or
yes.
the religious.
The higher ups are really not even excited about the prospect of Messiah. The working people The poor people look for this Messiah as a way to end the suffering. But the wealthy ones, they're not looking for Messiah. And so there's nobody to herald the birth of a king except all of a sudden you realize 500 years before the plan was set in place that gave the prophecy that put these people on the road to show up and bring gifts fit for a king. It's an amazing part of our Christmas story.
And my big aha moment was, think about it. We know about the shepherds. The shepherds were lowly and poor. But what we learned last week, we know those shepherds were in the land of Judea. They were most likely between Bethlehem and Jerusalem. That most likely they were responsible for raising some of the lambs that were used in the sacrifice. They were Jewish. The shepherds were Jewish, but they never participated in the Jewish religious ceremonies because they were perpetually unclean. They were dealing with dirty animals. They were dealing with dead bodies, dead animal bodies. So the first people that the angels came to were Jewish, but they were not the in crowd, and they were not religious, and they were not included with the religious people. Those are the first people that herald in the second. They weren't Jews at all. These guys were pagans or Gentiles. They were not Jews at all. And they are the second people that came to worship Jesus. And the other thing, over time, you always listen to how people have faith, whether if they do it from an emotional standpoint or an intellectual standpoint. And for me, who likes to do the history stuff or it gave me hope that the Magi, these people were studiers. So I like them.
So I thought this was a great point, that this idea that Jesus, Messiah, comes for all people. We get back to Isaiah where he says, my temple will be a house of prayer for all people. To the eunuchs who keep my Sabbaths, I'll give an inheritance greater. All right, so this is for all people. The angels that come that say, for all people, right? What Mary, the point that she made, and I thought it was great insight, the shepherds are outcasts. They don't even get to go to the temple because they're ceremonially unclean all the time, ritually unclean. And then the next ones who show up are Gentiles. This is truly the beginning of the idea of this is for all people. I want to go back real quick. I don't want to confuse all of this stuff, but I want to go back to Daniel because there's something else that happens later in Daniel. And this is all tied together, but he says, Daniel this is Daniel 9, I think, 20. While I was speaking, praying, confessing my sin and that of my people Israel, and presenting my petition before the Lord my God, while I was still praying, Gabriel, remember Gabriel? That's the one that appears to Mary. That's the one, okay, this is 500 years apart. And Gabriel comes, and Gabriel, the man I had seen in the earlier vision. Now, we know and understand this Gabriel to be an angel, what we call an angel. Daniel calls him a man. And all you can really get from that, because Daniel knows he's not a regular man, is that he appears as a man. Daniel perceives him as a man. But he says, the man I had seen in an earlier vision came to me in swift flight about the time of the evening sacrifice. He instructed me and spoke with me saying, "Oh, Daniel, I've come now to give you insight and understanding." Remember what I said last week, that these angels, these malach, are messengers. The word literally means messengers. And he shows up to Daniel. He says, I'm come to bring you a message directly from God. He is truly a messenger. At the beginning, what he tells him is 70 weeks are decreed for your people. Understand this. From the issuance of the decree, this is the message from the angel. This is the part that'll matter. to restore and rebuild Jerusalem. Those of you who are in the study on Daniel should remember this. But from the time the decree comes back to restore Jerusalem until the Messiah, the Prince. So here's Daniel getting a direct prophecy about when the Messiah will show up. And the 70 weeks we understand to be weeks of years. 70 times 7 years. And
490
it's 490 years. It's pretty much perfect for this prophecy. Until the Messiah, there will be 7 weeks and 62 weeks. And after the 62 weeks, the Messiah will be cut off and have nothing. 500-year-old prophecy, and he's describing the timing for the coming of the Messiah, and he's describing the fact that at the end of this Messiah, this is the death that we're familiar with. All of this has been set in place for 750 years, then 500 years, and at the right time, these Magi show up to proclaim the birth of a king. To me, this week, I always knew some of this, but I didn't ever put together just how perfectly, how beautiful all of this goes together.
And on verse 12, it says, "And having been warned in a dream not to return to Herod, they withdrew to their country by another route."
So Herod has told them, hey, go out, go find this new king for me, and when you find him, come back and tell me about him. I'm going to go worship. They go and find him, they bestow these gifts, and then they get warned in a dream. Don't go back to Herod. They go home by another way. And Herod, Mario, you can go ahead and read it if you want. I can just tell them.
Yeah, go ahead.
So they go home by another way, and Herod realizes he's been waiting for these guys to come back. And it says he realizes he's been duped by these Magi, and he's really, really angry. And so he does some calculations based on what he's been told, and he gives instructions to go to this Bethlehem place, and remember, it's only about 9 miles away, and kill all the babies, and I think it's all the baby boys, all the male children, 2 years of age and under. And people want to say that, oh, that tells us it's been 2 years. It really doesn't. Picture if you're Herod and what you want to do is kill this upstart that's gonna take your dynasty away. You want to be sure you kill him. Are you going to say, well, I figure he was born a year ago, so I'm going to kill everybody a year and younger? No, what you're going to do is leave yourself some room for error and take everyone 2 years and under. So it doesn't necessarily mean it was exactly 2 years before. But what Herod has done is he wants to make sure that this upstart challenging king is dead before he even gets started.
So we know it was not we know it wasn't at the manger because they were at a house. We know it wasn't at the manger because it would have taken time for all this. And we know it was less than 2 years. Those are the things that we do know.
Now, here's what comes up, there are a lot of scholars who say, we have no historic record of Herod ever killing. And the way this is told, and the way most people think about it, is that Herod just went out into Israel and killed off all the baby boys 2 years of age and under. It's very specifically limited to Bethlehem. And best we can figure, at that time, that might have only been 20 babies, 20 infants. It's not a whole lot. There's no reason why the killing of 20 infants in Bethlehem would have even been recorded. Herod killed a lot of people.
He killed his wife, he killed his son.
He killed 3 sons. And the reason he killed 3 sons is because he thought they were challenging him for his kingship. Herod was vicious. And Herod he understood the philosophy of power. And when his sons began, kind of like David's son did, going out and recruiting his own followers, he just killed them. He just killed his own sons. Why would he not kill 20 babies in Bethlehem to be sure and get rid of a potential rival. It doesn't even make sense that he wouldn't do that. And the way it's portrayed, the way I had always seen it portrayed, is like he sends out in all the land, all these soldiers, and they must have killed tens of thousands of little infant boys. It's just Bethlehem. And it probably 20 to 30 at the outside, just based on the size of the town and birth rates and stuff, maybe 30. It wouldn't have been recorded, as some major historical event. It's not even a blip in history.
So people that are trying to debunk the Bible use this to debunk the Bible. They say, if this had really historically happened, it would have been recorded. It wouldn't have been recorded.
It's just kind of a silly thing to conclude that because we don't have some record of a mass murder of all these infants, that it didn't happen. It makes perfectly good sense.
I do love the line, though, that they withdrew to their country by another route.
Yeah, we like to teach. I don't try and do sermons, but I'm going to tell you, it's one of those things that I come back to a lot. The wisdom of going home by another way. When you know that there's trouble waiting. And I have this nasty tendency to just march right into it. Sometimes you just need to go home by another way. And Mary and I talk about this from time to time. It's kind of a beautiful thing that they get told, I know you told Herod you're going to come back. Don't do it. Just take another path. And it was easy to avoid Herod. Anything else?
No?
Well, Luke would have probably given us the name of that country.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Instead of coming from the east
I agree.
and then returning to their country. Well, I don't even know if it was one country or three countries.
Well, and the only reason we think it was three, I mean, when you get to it, the reason we think that it came up with three is because there was three gifts, so each one of them had to give one gift. It was probably, best guess, it was probably a much bigger caravan.
It's highly unlikely that three guys carrying gold, frankincense, and myrrh, rich enough to have it, would be traveling alone through the wilderness to come to this place, because there are bandits everywhere. It's probably a caravan. In fact, if I had to if I was really just forced to say, how was it? I could just guarantee you it wasn't three guys on camels.
And it's like 700, 800 miles if you're looking from Babylon to Jerusalem. So it would have taken time. It would have been probably a large caravan.
But the idea that because there are three gifts, they say, well, there were three, and they call them kings, by the way. Let's get back to that real quick. We're almost done, but I'll throw in some bonus stuff. We three kings, and they refer to them as three kings. And I know why, but it's kind of like saying there were three of them because there are three gifts. The fact is, these Magi, these Chaldeans, rarely were kings. They carried the knowledge. They were behind the throne. They were the kingmakers. They were powerful, and yet they stayed behind the scenes. The advisors. Strangely, there's some references to them knowing how to make poisons and making that available, and some kings knocked off their rivals. These were wise men, but they were powerful, and they're almost a secret society. They're off in the shadows, but for the time, they have amazing knowledge. If you want to know about the magus, and it's the same root word as magic and magician, go back to that time, go back to 2 AD, and take with you a flashlight. People are going to think you're a magician. You can produce light out of your pocket, and there's no flame. You don't have to rub anything together. You don't have to to make the flame. They're going to look at you as having some amazing secret knowledge, and the idea that it's magic sort of stands to reason. And so when we see Nebuchadnezzar calling together his astrologers and necromancers, I went and looked at those words, and they're different words. Every one of these groups has their own little specialty. They read entrails, they read the stars. But the idea is if you can come up with some knowledge that seems so advanced compared to what I know, those people tended to say these are magicians. It is literally where we get our word for magic and for magicians. But the Chaldeans, this bunch that I'm convinced are the ones who come, these guys have got knowledge, and because they sit behind the scenes, they get really rich, and they can spend all their time studying and advising, and they don't have to be out in front with people trying to kill them and, having to fight wars and everything else. It's an amazing group the more I learned about it. What I want you to get, what I hope that some of you will get out of this week's study, is an idea of the long game, of the plans that God has that span generations, that span hundreds of years. We look at this place in terms of our own lifetime, and yet through this, and I can tell you that prophecy of Micah, that's absolutely as old as they say it is. We know that was a prophecy, and it matches what happened so tightly. If you have doubts ever, this is prophecy. This is absolute clear prophecy. And in it, and through what happened with Daniel, you see a plan for this Messiah that goes back for hundreds of years. And it comes to fruition perfectly. The bit about the star, sorry, I can't help, but the fact that they show up, and I do think, and this is where I said I'd get back to, last thing, what did they do with those rich gifts? Well, what we know is that Herod sends soldiers to go kill the babies, but Joseph is warned in a dream again. Joseph, get up, pack your family, and head off down to Egypt. Now, there's another prophecy that says, out of Egypt, I will raise my Messiah. I'll raise my ruler. And that's the only way he winds up in Egypt and then comes up out of Egypt. But did these gifts give them money to live on while they take off? I mean, they don't know anybody in Egypt. I think it's probably a good bet that was part of the plan. That's exactly what they did. Between the gold and the other valuable spices, they had enough money to live on. We don't know what happened to Joseph. I don't know. Did Joseph get embalmed with the myrrh? You can write all kinds of stories about this. But there's a plan here. And you see that at this time of Christmas, we celebrate the birth of the Messiah. It's not just a little baby in a manger. This is a Messiah that has been told and promised for hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of years, and the plan comes to fruition in God's own time. To me, it's more amazing, than a manger scene and some Christmas lights. We love the Christmas lights. We got a manger scene out front, you guys. I'll have it lit this week. I love the traditions, but the reality is to me, it is just amazing and it is beautiful.
Well, when you read Micah, the prophecy been here for a long, long time from of old and from all eternity.
From eternity.
Now he's talking about in the beginning was the Word, and the Word was with God.
It's exactly that. You're right, and it's part of what I was getting at. But I'm glad you brought it up. That prophecy says that he goes back to eternity. And Jesus himself, you remember when he says, even before Abraham was born, I am. Me, I am. I've been here, I've been around all of this time. And that's exactly what you see all the way back in this thing of Micah, that this Messiah has been around for eternity. His origins go back forever. Pretty amazing stuff.
So next week, it's not 59. Next week, we're going to do the extras. We're going to look at King Herod in a little more detail, Anna, and Simeon. We're going to look at those three characters. And then the last week, we're going to look at Jesus as a young boy.
And once again, I told you that this week, going back to Daniel, the bit about Herod, if you get a chance, don't miss it, because you're going to, what we find about Herod is, and the family, we keep hearing about Herod from before Jesus' birth, through his birth, through, and through his death, and then even after that, his descendants. The Herod dynasty and what we know as Christianity parallel, but they also, the existence of the Herod dynasty, you're going to find out, goes all the way back to Daniel and even before. It goes back to Jacob and Esau. It's really, really amazing once you put all the pieces together. So, hope you can come back.
And Christmas party next Sunday at 6 o'clock at our real house, not this house. And if you have problems RSVPing or knowing what to bring, just call me or email me.
Okay. God, I am so much in awe. The more we learn, the more we really look at the words you left for us. The evidence of your hand, the evidence of your plan, and I'm in awe of that. I'm thankful for it, but I'm afraid a whole lot of the time that maybe I don't even understand enough of it to be as thankful as I should be. But the fact that you laid preparations so far in advance tells me something about my life. It should tell us all, I think, but about me, it tells me about my life that you do have a plan, and that you work even when I'm not wise enough to see through the curtains. And the thing I ask is that you remind us to look for your hand, to look for the influence, and to look for your work. And then the times when we can't clearly see it, to trust that we know you're there and that we know that you're at work. And be with us this week. Be with all of these we've prayed for. God, be with Cheryl and with Alton. We're so concerned about them. We want them to feel better. And be with us that we seek opportunities to tell people about these gifts. Amen.
You guys can unmute yourself. There we go. Well, you guys, thank you. Hi, V. Didn't see you at the beginning. Good to see you.
Computer problem.
It's okay.
Look at your baby.
That's what I'm afraid of, is that it was it's a lot to take in. And I got up in the middle, and I think I got us off to a bad start. I'm kind of sorry.
You're fine. Just think of it this way. This book called the Bible wasn't, to be read today and have a class on Friday.
There you go. Well, and we'll see some of you guys this week. Julie, we'll see you, and we'll see Laura
Looking
for
forward
sure.
to meeting everybody in person.
There you go.
How is your Julie?
Julie is amazing. The medicine, I'm telling you, she said this week she feels 80% before she got this disease, which was 10 years ago. So we will feel, so she's not at 100%, but she says she feels at 80% of which before she even had this disease. So we will definitely
Yay.
take that as wonderful.
Absolutely.
Yes.
That's awesome.
Yes.
Awesome.
Well, God bless her.
There
Yes,
you go.
God bless her.
Yes, well, you guys have a wonderful week, and we'll see you
Thank
guys
you.
next Sunday morning or next Sunday evening, and next Sunday
Okay,
evening.
perfect.
Okay.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.
Looking forward to it. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.